Welcome back to Behind the HOA Stories, the channel where the most unbelievable neighborhood dramas come to life. If you love real stories of petty rules, power-hungry HOAs, and the people who stand up to them, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. It keeps me motivated to bring you these crazy HOA tales every single week. This isn't just about a tree. It's about power, control, and how far some people will go to make everyone else bend to their will. My 50-year-old oak tree became a battleground, and when Karen demanded I cut it down, she never expected the ending. For over 20 years, I lived in the same quiet neighborhood. My house wasn't the biggest. It wasn't the flashiest, but it had something no other house did, a massive oak tree in the front yard. 50 years old. Thick branches that stretched wide like a green umbrella, and deep roots that had held firm through storms, droughts, and time itself. This oak tree wasn't just a tree. It was part of the neighborhood's history. Kids had played under it. Couples had picnicked in its shade. Neighbors had told me they loved the way it looked in autumn when the leaves turned gold and red. It gave my home character. It gave the street life. And then Karen moved in. She was new. Loud, always watching, always complaining. The kind of neighbor who measured your grass with a ruler and wrote passive-aggressive notes if your trash was out for more than 3 minutes after pickup. We all know a Karen, right? At first, I tried to stay polite. Smile, wave, keep things friendly. But then she started mentioning the tree. At first, it was small comments. Doesn't that tree drop a lot of leaves? Must be hard to clean. Those roots look dangerous. Where they cracked the sidewalk. And then it escalated. One morning, I found a letter taped to my door. Official HOA stationery. The letter said my tree was a safety hazard, and I had 30 days to remove it. I was stunned. This tree had stood for half a century. It wasn't diseased. It wasn't leaning dangerously. An arborist had inspected it just 2 years earlier and said it was one of the healthiest oaks he'd seen. So why now? I didn't have to wonder long. A week later, I overheard Karen bragging to another neighbor. I pushed the board to act. That tree is ugly. It blocks the sun from my garden. And besides, I don't like the way it makes the street look. Outdated. I told them it offended me. And if I'm paying HOA dues, I shouldn't have to live offended. Offended. By a tree. I wasn't going to take this lying down. I pulled out the HOA rules and regulations. Nowhere did it say trees like mine were forbidden. In fact, the HOA guidelines specifically encouraged natural greenery to enhance curb appeal. So I gathered evidence. Photos of the tree. A copy of the arborist report. Statements from neighbors who loved it. And I wrote a formal appeal. At the next HOA meeting, I stood up. My voice shook at first, but I steadied myself. I explained the tree's history, its health, how it contributed to the community. I laid down the evidence. And for a moment, it worked. The board looked hesitant. They murmured. A few nodded. But then Karen stood up. And no, she had prepared her performance. She gasped dramatically about how the tree gave her allergies, how the shade made her property value drop, how it attracted bugs and scared children. Lies stacked on lies. She even cried, tears on command. And just like that, the vote swung. The board ruled. The tree had to go. I walked out of that meeting with my heart pounding in my ears. And by the way, if you've ever had to deal with a nightmare HOA or a Karen who thinks the world revolves around them, make sure you're subscribed. Because trust me, these stories get wilder every week. The day came. A removal crew showed up, chainsaws in hand. I stood on my porch, helpless, as they began hacking into the oak that had shaded my home for decades. The sound of chainsaws ripping into it felt like a violation. Neighbors gathered, some shaking their heads, others whispering in disbelief. Karen? She stood on her lawn, sipping lemonade, smiling, watching like it was a show put on for her personal entertainment. The trunk crashed to the ground with a thunder that shook the street. My stomach dropped. It felt like losing a friend. And then something happened. As the crew began grinding down the stump, they hit something solid. Metal. Confused, they dug deeper. And buried inside the roots was a rusted lockbox. The whole neighborhood leaned in as they pried it open. Inside were old photographs, yellowed letters, and a collection of coins dated back decades. It was a time capsule. Turns out, the tree had been planted by the original owners of the house as a memorial. They had buried a family box beneath it. Their letters told stories of love, hardship, survival, a legacy. And Karen? She had destroyed it. The news spread like wildfire. Neighbors were furious. What was once just my tree became our history. The HOA board members realized they had been manipulated by Karen's theatrics. They called an emergency meeting to review the decision. But it was too late. The tree was gone. The damage was permanent. Here's where karma came in. Without the tree, Karen's house was now fully exposed to the blazing afternoon sun. Her precious garden withered in weeks. Her cooling bills skyrocketed. And the very curb appeal she claimed the tree ruined, the neighborhood lost charm and property values dipped. But that wasn't the best part. Neighbors stopped trusting her. They avoided her. She became the pariah of the block. People whispered. Kids laughed. Invitations stopped. She wanted control. What she got was isolation. For me, the loss hurt. Every time I walked past that empty patch of dirt, I felt a pang. But over time, something shifted. That lockbox, it connected me with the original family. Their grandchildren reached out when they heard the story. They thanked me for preserving the letters and coins. They told me the tree had been planted in honor of their grandfather, a war veteran who never made it home. Suddenly, the story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about memory, community, carrying forward a legacy that even Karen couldn't destroy. And in a strange way, the oak lived on, not in wood and leaves, but in the unity it created. Neighbors bonded. We planted new trees together. And every time Karen peeked out her window, she saw not her victory, but the reminder that she had failed to break us. So, in the end, Karen got exactly what she wanted and exactly what she deserved. My oak tree may be gone, but the roots of that story grew stronger than ever. And speaking of roots, our next story involves an HOA president who tried to find a family for planting roses. What happened when the neighbors fought back? Let's just say it didn't end with flowers. Make sure you're subscribed to Behind the HOA Stories so you don't miss it. Until then, remember, sometimes the smallest battles grow into the biggest wars.